Oh, can I still talk?
Yes, I don't have any like planned scripted opening like modern day debate. I don't care if we can talk about anything, so it doesn't make a difference to me.
Yeah, yes, same here. I, I'm like I said in Twitter, I'm not as well read as you are. I'm just kind of shocked that you want to talk to me. Like you talk to like experts in their field, like guys who know their stuff. I'm just like your average Joe Christian apologetics enthusiast. So we can talk about anything. You can ask me questions. You're way more experienced in doing this, so if you want to take the lead, please take the lead. I'm kind of nervous, so
It's okay as long as you just don't strip on screen. Everything should be fine.
I have sudden urges, but I'll do my best. Yeah.
So yeah,
So yeah, man.
but I think like I don't just interview experts. I also interview Darth Dawkins. So you're like
Oh yeah.
several like you're at least like 10 levels above him. So you're fine.
Oh really? Yeah. I've seen his name on on the YouTube apologetics atheist debate stuff, and I've never watched any of his debates or his. He's a Christian, right?
Yeah, he's a precept. So he says the only way to have any knowledge is
Ah,
God, except he's a very angry precept. And so he screams a lot and says some very stupid, angry things all the time.
really?
So he's
Hmm.
one of the entertainment value guys that people love to watch just because it's a train wreck and people like train wrecks.
Okay, yeah, I get that. I mean, I'm not a precept myself. I mean, there's some arguments I can see, but like for the most part, I'm evidentialist slash like classical. So yeah,
Cool. So it does look like we are live and the sound is good. So thanks for Cornell.
wonderful.
Thanks for coming on. Would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself before we get started?
Sure. Gosh. So my name's Cornell. I live in the Pacific Northwest in Washington State. Uh, I'm married. I have a beautiful wife and beautiful daughter, and I'm a Christian. And I an apologetics enthusiast. I'm an amateur. I've probably been following apologetics and into this kind of stuff for about 10 years. Um, and yeah, I just love talking about, does God exist? Stuff about Christianity, obviously. I love exploring any kind of philosophy and apologetics themed stuff. Um, yeah, I, I'd say I'm passionate about it, but I still have a lot to learn. Um, and yeah,
Cool. So I'm an atheist, as you might have guessed. Which means I believe I don't think there are any good reasons to believe in a God. I don't think there's any reason to believe in a God. Could you tell me some of the reasons you believe there are? And I'd like to tell you my thoughts on those and hear your thoughts on my position.
yeah, sure. So I'm, I, I think some of the like classic arguments are sound. The Kalam cosmological argument, the contingency argument. I've been kind of dabbling in the ontological argument a little bit. It's so yeah. I mean, the ontological I think is interesting. I don't use it to persuade people, but I think it's very fascinating. Um, but yeah, I think the uh, teleological argument that one works. I mean, basically, like the major ones, I think they're sound.
Okay,
So
well, let's start with the cosmological one. Why do you think the cosmological one indicates a God? So, like, the universe began to exist, the universe has a cause, therefore God? Question mark.
yeah, yeah. I mean, so a lot of people say like, well, some people say, the cosmological argument doesn't get you to God; it just gets you to a cause, right? Um, I think we have to obviously make an inference from that. So like, well, what could that cause be, right? If if it's deductive and it leads you to a cause necessarily, you have to ask the question. Well, could it be the universe? Could it be, something else? What is a sufficient cause for the universe? I think something that's not the universe, something that's personal, something powerful. I think I think it's pretty. I think it leads right into something like God. So yeah.
Oh, how so? Because I think that the cause of the universe could just be another physical thing, and that seems to be like the most reasonable inference. Is that when we look at physics and all the different progresses we've made in physics, it seems like, oh, there's a big bang, probably something caused by more physics. That seems to be the consensus in cosmology and physics and astronomy and all the different physics related fields. Like nobody thinks it's a god that caused this thing. It's all of the theories say it's just more physics. So why would do you think it would be reasonable to defer to like theologians as opposed to the actual physicists who are the experts in the field who all disagree with the conclusion that God had anything to do with the beginning of the Big Bang?
Yeah. So I mean that's a interesting point. So I guess the way I see it is, it seems rather circular to just kind of go to more physics, unless unless you because it doesn't have to be the Big Bang. I mean, it could have been the Big Bang, like all of reality, everything we know could have been the Big Bang. It doesn't have to be. I think that eventually there is some kind of beginning of all of reality, whether it's the Big Bang or not.
Oh
I,
wait, so just to clarify, does that mean do you think that all of reality there's evidence that all of reality had a beginning?
I think I think that the universe, aka all of reality, is contingent.
Well, so
So
in physics, the universe only applies to our universe, not everything. It doesn't. No one in physics says universe equals all of reality. So
okay, so okay, okay.
so yeah, no one, everybody in physics thinks, yeah, there's probably a natural thing that's always been there. No one says that all of reality is contingent, just that our universe is in the stuff we observe around us is contingent. So do you have any reason to believe that all of reality is contingent?
I think that let me kind of go back to the words I was using, the definitions. I, I kind of use the universe and all of reality kind of like interchangeably. So I'm happy to kind of go with whatever is more like what makes more sense, and because I don't want to I don't want to get confused. But um, basically, I'm as far as I know, we don't have any evidence of anything other than the universe, and we know that our universe began to exist. I'm open to the idea that other stuff exists. So like I'm not really, if there's some kind of good evidence, scientific evidence that there's a multiverse or something outside the universe created it, fine, cool. But to me, in terms of contingent, I can't think of any scientific or philosophical reason why the universe is necessary.
So I want to clarify something there. So if we want to use the Kalam cosmological argument, the universe had a beginning, therefore the universe has a cause. Uh,
Mhm.
in that definition, the first one would, if you're using the definition that the universe is all of reality, independent of a god or whatever, then you would need to justify the first premise, which there's no evidence at all, as far as I know, that would justify that all of reality has a cause. Um, Normally, theists say, well, the Big Bang is the beginning, therefore the universe as defined by physics has a cause, which all physicists agree there, but that doesn't mean everything. In that context, the universe just refers to our physical reality and nothing more than that. So it seems like the argument is conflating those two different definitions, uh, saying that, well, the universe had a beginning and the Big Bang. Well, those only apply to our physical universe, not all reality, and so that wouldn't imply a god. Or if you're using the larger definition that the universe applies to all reality, then why would we think that all reality has a cause? And you said because you don't see any reason to think the universe is necessary. Is that the only reason to believe that all of reality must have a cause?
No, I mean like the classic infinite regress problem. Yeah, I mean, I think you'd have to give me some pretty good reasons why the universe would be necessary. And infinite regress, I think that's I'm not willing to bite the bullet on that and be like, okay, yeah, it just keeps on going forever and ever and ever. Um, and
How is
so
God
to
not an
me,
infinite regress?
well, because God doesn't do so. whenever we think about infinite regress, we think about like some infinite regress, an infinite amount of events, like
Dominoes.
causal events, right? Yeah, yeah.
Dominoes, right.
I I'm not sure that there's any good reasons, and maybe you can show me that God before the universe was doing an infinite amount of past events.
Well, no, I mean, so like if we compare infinite past event universe with the God, what's the difference between those two things? Why couldn't we just say that, hey, there's a universe that has this property of something that
Mm-hmm.
God has that makes him not an infinite regress? Because to me, it seems like you have this God that's infinitely powerful and has existed like sans time, to use the William Lane Craig term. He exists outside of time. Well, okay, we could
Right.
just, if you want to claim, to me, that just seems no different from an infinite regress. Like, all right, if you want to claim one infinite in that direction as opposed to that direction, like, okay, I can just say that the universe sans time. There's some property of the universe that goes outside of time and say that's what caused the universe. So I don't need an infinite regress either. All you're doing is changing the direction of the infinite, whether it's a past infinite or an infinite that's outside of time infinite. Either one's an infinite. So for me, it doesn't seem to make any difference either way. I could just say, well, all right, if you want to say it's not a past infinite, I could just say the universe is an outside of time infinite too. And so that seems to solve the problem. Why would,
Right.
what's the difference here?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm not an expert or well read on infinity or set theory or anything like that. So I don't know. I'm just going to be,
Yeah, I'm just asking for your
yeah.
opinion, your thoughts. Don't need
So,
to get a
so
PhD
as
here.
right. Yeah. Yeah. I'm just letting the audience know or whatever. Cause if I say something stupid or that doesn't make sense, it's cause I just don't know, but
Yeah, Cornell
I'll
is a
just go off.
PhD in astrophysics, so if he gets anything wrong, you could just
Yeah.
email him. Here's his email. Give you like some papers here. You can just.
Yeah. Yeah. Basically PhD stands for poser hater degree. So, so yeah, just in case everyone, anyway, so going back to the whole infinite regress thing, if this entity that is the cause of the universe is atemporal, then you don't have a temporal regression of infinite events. You don't have that problem, right? Or am I missing something? So
um, well, so it's like if you say that an infinite regress in time is a problem, um, and then you say to solve this problem, we're going to change that and say this. There's this new property. It's the infinite regress solving property, essentially. Well, I can say, all right, so if you want to add this property in, I can add that same property to the universe. I can say there's something in the universe that has
mm,
this infinite regression solving property. So
okay,
if you want to say an infinite regress is a problem and you have a solution and you're going to have this argument property that you've imagined to
right,
solve this thing, well, I can say, okay, I can take that same property and just apply it as a natural property of the
right,
universe. There's no reason to think that that's a God.
right. Yeah. So I noticed you like to do that. Like you like to kind of like basically switch it up and switch it on back on me and be like, I could just apply it to something else. I guess like I see that there's a kind of a danger in that tactic you have because I feel like if you try to consistently like match every kind of property that we ascribe to God, you're kind of like dangerously coming close to like
Renaming
parody.
God, right? So
You're just basically like your parody is basically just God, and so like you're not really avoiding it. You're just saying I'm going to call it nature, but like everything about this thing you call nature, or more physics or whatever, is basically God. You're just not calling it God.
right, but I get rid of the consciousness. So like you would agree that your definition of a God is a conscious mind, right?
Yes,
And
yeah.
so mine doesn't have
So
that.
consciousness makes a difference. Is what
Yep.
you're saying?
Yep. So in mine, naturalistic pantheism does not have the consciousness. I can keep everything else, get rid of the consciousness, because that's essentially the difference between nature and God. Nature is unguided natural forces. God is a
Right.
guided mind. So if you get rid of the mind, you get rid of the God. And so it seems like we can have all of the stuff we needed to. Well, there's two things here. So first is if you're saying there's all these problems with reality that you need to solve, and so you're going to insert all of these properties to solve them, like, well, you need to be, it needs to sand time, it needs to be timeless. Like, all right, I don't agree with that. I don't think it does need that. I think even regresses are perfectly fine, like most physicists do and cosmologists. But even if I want to grant that, I can just grant that for the sake of the argument and say, well, okay, so we need this new property of the timelessness, and I can say, all right, I could just apply that to nature. But why? So the first aspect is, well, why we probably don't even need this new property. It's just an added unnecessary thing that makes the theory less simple. But all right, let's grant that. Well, we can add all of these properties without the consciousness to just nature. So why would you conclude? Why do you think this is evidence of a God? Since all of those same things can exist without the consciousness.
So so let me see if I understand correctly. Basically, you can remove the consciousness. You can have it being necessary, and you can have it. What were the other properties that you mentioned?
Well, I can take all of the
Necessary.
well, I can take all of the ones from a God individually, but so far all we've gone is just the necessary timeless one.
So,
That's the only one we've talked
so
about so
Nate.
far.
Okay, so this more physics or just more nature can be necessary, timeless, all powerful. I'm trying to what else? Um,
Spaceless.
it can be spaceless. This nature can be spaceless.
Yep.
Um, and it can an infinite it can be a logical contradiction, like a infinite regress.
Oh, well,
Or
no, logical contradictions are not an infinite are not infinite
an
regresses.
infinite regress is not a logical
Correct.
contradiction.
There's no logical contradiction in that. So logical contradiction is a thing is itself
Yeah.
and is not itself. So like there's actually quotes of William Lane Craig explicitly saying this, that infinite regresses are literally not a logical
Okay.
contradiction. But
I'd like to see that.
he's saying that there's a logical problem in it, but it's not a logical contradiction. So it's like saying space
Okay.
and time bend. That's something that seems to be like a logical problem, but it's not a contradiction, because
Okay.
to be a contradiction, there's a specific kind of logical syllogism that has to follow. It has to be P and not P at the same time. And
Okay.
so,
Right.
but
Right. Yeah.
but yeah, so there is no actual paradox in an infinite regress, but that's a different argument. So yeah, I'm going to go with the majority of cosmologists, physicists, everyone in physics who says, yeah, no, there's no problem here at all.
With an infinite regress.
Mhm. Have you seen the William Lane Craig Sean Carroll debate?
Yeah, it's been a while.
So in that debate, Sean Carroll says, yeah, there's no problem with an infinite regress. I did a Google search, and in 30 minutes, I found 17 models that all have an infinite regress. There's no problem here.
Yeah.
So, uh,
Yeah. I
so
guess it doesn't make sense to me because, like, yeah, I'm sure you know the issue. Like, it an infinite regress. It kind of sounds like how would we get to this moment in time? For example, like it's almost like jumping out of a hole with no bottom. Like, how could you get to like halfway through or this amount? Like, if you literally have an infinite regress, I'm not sure if you're actually saying that, but like if you are willing, like let's say someone is saying, yeah, the reality we live in right now is literally an infinite regress. We would never be able to get to this point in time right now where Cornell and Tom are talking, right? Like, how does that even work?
because time doesn't work like that. So it's the same argument that physicists or philosophers used the same kind of argument against Einstein. It said time it can't bend. It's not a physical thing. So how could you bend time? And Einstein was like, reality doesn't care about your intuitions. Time does bend. Time is relative. It's different for different people in different locations. It doesn't work the same way for everywhere. And so if you think of time in the intuitive sense, like it's a line and one moment follows the next moment, then yeah, it seems like that's a problem. How could you get to this moment with infinitely many past moments? Well, the answer is time doesn't work like that. That's not how time works. Time doesn't care about your intuitions.
So if time is relative to the observer,
Yep.
so if you get rid of observers, do you have time?
Yeah. So observer just means,
Are you a beast theorist?
no.
Sorry,
But so even in A theory, time doesn't work the way William Lane Craig says, which is why all the physicists who use A theory reject Craig's argument. So the point here is that I'm not arguing for B theory here, so that's
I'd have to
a
check all this. Yeah,
different topic. But so the point here is that time doesn't work in an intuitive way. So using your intuition to assess time is incorrect. Like saying there's an intuitive problem with an infinite regression that is a time one event after another is doesn't apply to time. Like time doesn't care about your intuitions there. The second thing is observers don't mean minds. Observers mean an object that bends the curvature of spacetime. So electrons are observers, or particles are observers. You don't. A sensor is an observer. It's not about a mind. So technically, you do need an observer to bend spacetime because it's anything that bends spacetime, but it's not a mind.
so everything is an observer, which comes kind of does that fit into your what is it, panentheism? Am I saying that right?
Well, I'm not a pantheist, a naturalistic pantheism.
Yeah, and that,
Panentheism is slightly different, but so a counter hypothesis to theism. It's not like my actual belief.
okay, so it's it's just a counter to kind of defeat the yeah, the God arguments. Okay, right. So, gosh, I'm trying to retrace how we got to here. So basically, um,
Yeah, we were talking
infinite
about.
regress is not a problem because time is not linear. Is that a right way to kind of
Yeah, that's to be a
time,
good
time is not like a succession?
paraphrase.
Okay.
Well, it can be a succession line like that, but it doesn't work strictly like that. It bends. It bends just fine. So you can have bends and fluctuations in it. It's not like a straight line, like a unbendable thing. If it bends and it fluctuates, and you can have changes in it, and it can be manipulated like any fluid or physical object, then yeah, it's totally fine to have it change and stuff. Like a domino, like 30 down the line could fall over because the wind knocked it over, and the other dominoes could still be falling at the same time, and that's perfectly fine. So you can have a bunch of different dominoes that are all falling independent of each other. Uh, so like if you have domino number one is knocking over domino number two, and domino number 30 is knocking over domino number 31, they can both be falling at the same time, and they can go back up and they can go backwards, and they can all do all kinds of stuff. It's like
Yeah,
the
but if
time.
you have an infinite amount of them, like I don't see how that fixes the problem if you still have an infinite amount of them. Like what?
So it's like the ocean. So
Can an infinite?
imagine there's an infinite body of water, and there's waves all the way through the ocean. How did you get from this how did the wave go from here to here? Well, it doesn't need to go the entire way. There's a bunch of different waves. So the fact that you get from this particular point or this particular wave where we're at in time has nothing
Yeah,
to do with the past infinites. You don't need all of those to get to here. Time is a
right.
thing, and it fluctuates like water. So, and it can go
So you
backwards.
were maybe I'm just attacking the analogy instead. But this is kind of popped into my mind. You were using the domino analogy and how time is not linear, so they can like loop around each other, and like domino number 30 can knock down domino number 100 or whatever. So like to me, it's like if that's true, like can all of them get knocked over if there's an infinite amount of dominoes and they can literally all there's an infinite amount of ways they can loop, they can all be knocking each other over. Can an infinite amount of dominoes knock each other over, or am I totally missing the point?
Um,
It didn't that analogy didn't make sense to me.
so it's like there's a third factor. If you have a row of infinite dominoes, obviously, and there's only dominoes and nothing else that exists in the universe, then obviously the
Yeah.
only thing that's going to knock over the dominoes is a previous domino. But if there's something else there, like the wind can knock over that domino or that domino or that domino or that domino, and it
Oh, the
doesn't.
wind.
Yeah. So
What's
so
the wind? What is,
so if there's a third variable independent of the time, like space or something else, that can cause a fluctuation at different points along the timeline, then you don't need to start at the beginning, even though there's an infinite past. You can just start at this one where the wind knocked it over. Does that make it clear?
I think so. I guess to me, you have to posit a bunch of other stuff that has to exist infinitely, right? Like
Uh,
the wind would be like what, like like matter or space, like you said, right?
yeah, like
So
fundamental forces in
yeah,
physics, emergent space time.
right. So like maybe it's kind of not a good idea to keep chasing the whole like infinite regress thing, but uh, so like to
Oh, and again, I'm not saying this is an infinite regress. I'm saying this thing sans time. It exists outside of time, like you think God does.
oh well then it doesn't really make sense to describe. Yeah, I just don't. It doesn't make sense to describe like these events happening, these things happening when there's no time like that. Don't you need like how what if it's sans time, if it's atemporal, then like what is something really happening? Like doesn't it take time for things to, especially these like non-conscious object? I don't know. It's just
So,
I,
so I'm saying
yeah.
that time is a thing, just like it is in your model, and then God is outside of that thing, and God can start it like the first domino or whatever. The same thing applies to this undiscovered force of physics. It lives outside of time. So time is a thing out there that's
Okay.
infinite. And this thing
Okay.
outside of it can knock over specific dominoes.
Okay. So time and this thing are, oh, sorry, not time. So these things are outside of time, like the first domino, and it just falls over because of other fundamental forces of physics. Like what makes the first domino fall over before time?
No, no. So there's this thing that is outside of time, and it has no connection whatsoever.
Got it.
And this
Okay.
thing has fluctuations that affect time,
Okay. So the fluctuations don't require time.
just like God doesn't. It's just however God does it, that's how it does it.
Okay. All right. So if I'm willing to call God a fluctuation as long as it's because like to me, like I said earlier, like if we just give this fluctuation all the same qualities or definitions of God, like that's cool with me. Uh, I'm trying to understand what caused how this fluctuation made this domino fall over, or how it started the dominoes, or like what. That's kind of
How,
what I'm trying to get down
how do
to.
you
Like,
think God did it?
well, he's personal, so he can choose to. He has like free will. He's conscious, right?
So all
But like
choices we know of,
fluctuation,
all choices we know of occur in time. So we don't know of a choice that can exist outside of time. So how are you saying choices can exist outside of time?
right? But it isn't all choices that we know of exist in time. So how can I say? Well,
Because your
I
argument
guess
is, well, for an event to happen, it has to happen in time, right? Well, okay, so for a choice to happen, it has to happen in time. So if you're saying, well, there can be a kind
right.
of choices that is outside of time,
Yeah,
how? And
I
if
think
I can say the same thing, there could be a kind of matter outside of time.
yeah. I just it, if like this is how I'm thinking of it. I think William Lane Craig was saying like the first ever moment was also the first moment of time. So like if God had a thought or an idea or whatever, I don't know, it would be at the same time that he created time or whatever. I don't know if that even makes sense, but or if I even describe that the way he did. But I, I guess in terms of you said it takes. Tell me again the objection. It takes time to have a thought. Is that what you said?
Yeah, so it's the same
Okay,
objection you're making. You're saying that, well, how did the first domino fall? It must have been caused
right,
by something, and that cause has to be in time or whatever.
right. So like, um, uh, I think that the conclusion. So, for example, everything that begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist. Therefore, so obviously, all of our thoughts are in time because we live in the universe where there's time. We make an inference of what the cause of the universe is, and I think that the most reasonable explanation is that a personal, conscious God did it. So, uh, uh, to me, it seems kind of like necessary that something like consciousness or that has consciousness would would be the first cause. At least something free, something that's not determined. So like I don't think it's a problem just because like every duck I've ever seen has a
All
duck
right,
bill doesn't mean
I'm
that.
not making an inductive argument that necessarily it's like
Okay,
black swan. So what I'm arguing is here is that if you want to say, so we know all the conscious choices we've seen are all made in space and time. They all require space and time.
okay,
But you want to say there's this new kind that we haven't discovered yet. I can just do the same thing. So if you say all matter and stuff all material interactions are done in space and time, I can say, well, there's this new kind we haven't discovered yet, and it's outside
hmm
of time, just like you have. So we've both
okay,
posited there's this new property, and it doesn't seem like yours is any more reasonable than mine. We've just asserted there's this new thing, and we can just say, well, I caused it. We don't know, but therefore this thing. But then you made the argument that you think it has to be a mind for some reason or a free thing for some reason. Well, why is that the case? Like, why would this mind free thing be a better explanation than this unknown natural force?
wow, okay. So um, I think so. As far as minds go, like we know that we know. Well, you probably disagree with this. You don't believe in free will, do you?
No, but you can go any way you want in the argument, so that's perfectly fine. If you
Well,
want to bring a free will, that's perfectly
right.
fine.
So I don't think free will is like this new property that I just kind of pulled out of nowhere to just like make my argument work. I think that we do have free will, but so
So,
uh,
so you're saying we have other examples of free will from the past, and therefore you can infer from those other examples that it could do it, something like that?
uh, kind of like I guess I don't have like some kind of formal written down argument, but
Well,
I guess
would it be reasonable for me to say that we've had unicorns in the past, therefore unicorns caused that hoof print? Like, probably not, right? Since even though we have people thinking they have unicorns, it's not actually
right.
evidence unicorns actually exist, right?
Yeah,
So,
but that's not really what I'm doing. I guess I don't think that's what the clom tries to do. So like uh, it, it um, oh gosh, I'm kind of like stumbling over my own thoughts here.
that's perfectly fine. You can take your time. So where we're at is that
Yeah,
so we need something, or you think we need something outside of space and time, and this thing needs to have some new spaceless, timeless property. You say it's a free will mind thing. I say it's an undiscovered natural thing. Why would the free will mind thing be better than the unknown natural thing?
well, the unknown natural thing is unknown.
Well, I
I
mean,
mean,
I would argue that so is the free will thing. So I'd say
oh, okay, so free will.
so
Okay,
so so far in our argument, you haven't presented any evidence of the free will thing. So
oh,
just for the sake of the
right,
argument,
yeah,
so far all you have is you have asserted this free will thing, and I have asserted an unknown natural thing. And
right.
so why do
A,
you? What would be the evidence to prefer the free will thing?
a free a personal agent that has free will has the ability to make the choice or the decision to start the universe.
Outside of time.
So outside of time, well, at the same moment of time, if you want to try to avoid that. I don't
Oh
know
yeah,
if there's
that's
other
fine.
ways
I
to
don't.
work around it.
The phrasing there doesn't make a difference to me. We can just generalize all of those to mean whatever the at the same time or whatever the sans time, whatever William Lane Craig uses. So, but I'm saying that so you've asserted that this free will decision thing can be independent of time, and I've asserted that my particle can be independent of time. How do you
Okay,
show one is actually more likely to be true than the other? Which one of those two claims is?
right. As far as I'm concerned, your parody is no different than mine. So it's not really a problem. You're just telling me that you're calling this something else. So to me, like I guess I,
Well,
your
because
particle that has the same property as my thing. The only difference is I'm calling it God and you're calling it a particle. I
well, that doesn't
I don't
work.
see
That
a problem with
that
that.
doesn't quite work. So, because when you say it
Okay,
needs to be a free will decision, there's lots of things that require to make a free will decision. You need a mind, you need
right.
intentionality, you need to have a
Hmm.
decision making. None of those are required under my particle thing. So my particle thing is simpler. It's just a quantum
Okay.
fluctuation. It requires absolutely none of that.
Okay. So if I say, well, we have examples of intentionality and free will, like people making choices that are un that are not determined by anything else, you would argue against that, right?
Well,
You would
no.
say
So I
no,
would
you don't
say
have that stuff.
we can just grant that for the moment. Say, okay, we have these non-determined choices. Okay, I can say we have these non-determined quantum fluctuations that happen for no deterministic reason, and I can say those happen just fine. They have no brain, they have no mind, no intentionality. They can cause the universe. Why again? Why are you preferring these mind things? Like so,
Yeah. So, well, I when you say that, I just think of like other arguments that your your random uh, your random particles. Like I don't see why random particles would make a universe with the same constants and qualities that we have now.
okay,
And
sure. So I definitely that's a good transition into other arguments, but I want to stick with just this argument. So just looking at the Kalam,
right,
on the Kalam, it gives us absolutely no reason to prefer a free will thing over a quantum particle, right? Either one could answer the question. It doesn't, on its own, tells us really nothing. There's nothing in the argument that would prefer a free will thing, correct?
well, I'm trying to think here because like if this thing is not determined and it's random versus something that's not determined but it's not random, I think I would go in favor of the. Well, sorry, did I just? Uh, um, yeah, this conscious agent who has free will but can decide to create. I would favor that. I would favor that over like what's more likely to create. Yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah. So
I would
essentially,
I would favor that over your parity.
so essentially, we have things could be completely determined by prior causes. Things could be completely random, so they have no determination. And then you're saying there's this other option. The minds can do this other thing that isn't determined and isn't random. Now, I don't know. That isn't coherent to me. Like I've never understood what exactly you mean by that. It's just saying there's this new category that we can't explain, and it's there, and it can do stuff. But so I don't. So if I could just grant that for the sake of the arguments, there's these three categories. We have this determined
Yeah.
category, a random category, and this new category of the free decision category thing. Why would you prefer this new category thing over the random category thing? Because the random thing, we have lots of evidence of the random thing. I don't think we have any evidence of this free thing. Um, why would you think this is real? One. Second, why would we prefer this over the random thing?
Okay, so we don't have evidence of. We have a lot of evidence of the random thing. We don't have a lot of evidence of something free, right? And then why would I prefer that, right? Okay, so uh, so to me, I think that first of all, like, do you really think there's a lot of evidence of like your position of a lot of random stuff happening, undetermined
Yep,
random stuff?
that's the consensus in physics is that randomness is an actual thing in the universe that's not determined by anything else. There's a Phil survey or a survey of physicists paper that has that as the conclusion. That's one of the questions. Is randomness a fundamental feature of the universe? Most of them say yes. I think it's very strange, but that is actually the consensus in physics that randomness is a true thing in the universe.
So do you is that part of the what is that called?
It's not the Phil.
Copenhagen.
What?
Does that have anything to do with quantum mechanics and the Copenhagen interpretation?
The Copenhagen interpretation is one of them, but it's not the same. So
That's not the basis of it.
no, so it's the basis of it is quantum mechanics. That's correct, and it doesn't have anything. It's most of them all agree that randomness is a fundamental part. So it's not just the Copenhagen that's one of them. There's also lots of other ones that also come to the same conclusion. The Copenhagen doesn't actually say one way or the other. It just gives a description saying we can use this equation to describe the outcome, but it doesn't tell us anything about ontology. But all the different ontological views, most of them conclude randomness is real.
Okay, so you're willing to you will concede that we can at least have randomness, right?
Yep.
Okay. But not free will because
Well,
uh,
I wouldn't go that far. So I'd say that I don't know what you mean by free will. So I know what determinism is. I know what randomness is. We have lots of evidence of both of these things. You've said there's this new thing that is this free will thing, which I don't think we have any evidence for. I don't know what that means. Um, and so first is, well, what evidence do we have to say there is this third category of thing? And second is, why would you prefer this third category over the other two or the randomness one?
yeah. So I don't have like some kind of like good argument or formal argument for free will. I can try to define free will for you, like uncoerced,
Or
undetermined decision.
why do you think free will is a thing? Why do you think it's real?
Because I have it. I experience it every single day. I think that in order for whatever caused the universe, it would need to be undetermined. If it was determined, then it's just another domino. So and I do think infinite regress is a problem. I wasn't really convinced by what you were saying earlier. Maybe I didn't understand, but um, I think that technically the universe could be eternal, but it would still be contingent. So um, I could maybe see that, but um, so to like I just it, to avoid the infinite regress problem or like that logical problem. I guess I haven't looked into whether it's actually an actual contradiction or not, and I kind of want to look more into that. But if I want to avoid logical problems, I think that it's I think it we'd never be able to get to this. moment in time, if if it did go on long, yeah, I just
Well,
have to.
yeah, I'm granting the infinite
But,
regress argument for the sake of the thing here. So there's three
okay, okay,
options.
okay.
There's three possible solutions to the infinite regress problem that you've presented.
Mhm.
One is it could be determined. So, for example, there could be, imagine if God was determined by his nature. So God's nature has always is what it is, and he is determined to make the universe in this way, and therefore he makes the universe, and that's the first instant of time. He could still be determined. So it's still possible to have a determined thing that creates the universe. So determinism doesn't mean just infinite dominoes or infinite regression. There's different kinds of determinism. You can still have a determined necessary thing. That's perfectly fine. But
Determine necessary thing.
mhm.
Okay,
Does that make
and it
sense?
avoids infinite regress.
Yeah. So just say God's decisions are determined by his nature, right?
I don't know. I don't know if I agree with that.
Well, I'm not
I just have.
saying you would agree with it. It's just a hypothetical. So you could say this is
Oh,
like an alternate version of Christianity. So instead of
okay.
God having free will, he's determined by his nature, and that you get the same thing.
Yeah. Uh, yes. I don't know. I haven't thought enough about that idea to really agree, but I see what you're saying. Yes.
Okay, so that's
Yeah.
that would be one of the possibilities to answer the infinite regress problem. Another one would be randomness is itself a fundamental part of the natural quantum thing or whatever, and it was outside of time and it caused the universe. And then there's the free thing that you said. And so you said the reason that you think there's the third category is because you have free will. Um,
Well, that's one of the reasons.
yeah, well,
Yeah.
it's for sure. I wasn't saying it's the only reason. So you have this free will thing, and that's the reason you believe free will exists. This third category that exists. But I don't see any reason to come to that conclusion. Like if we like, what is the evidence of this free thing? Because if I zap you in the correct spot of your brain, I can make you do something. Or if we add a tumor, we can make you do something in the future that you just didn't realize yet. Or all of the evidence in neurology, psychology, and cognitive scientists leads to the conclusion there's no free there. Your brain is determined. So all of the choices we've ever seen, ever made by anybody, seem to be completely determined. Um,
Yeah. I think that's more of a like a, a correlate. Those are more correlations with the brain and the consciousness. And based on the little that I know about it, so I'm not fully convinced that um, the evidence conclusively shows that consciousness and our will is determined.
I'm not sure what you mean by conclusively shows. Like I would go with if 90 something percent of the consensus in neurology, cognitive science, and psychology all come to the same conclusion based off the evidence. I think that's pretty conclusive for the most part. So I would say from my standard, it's definitely conclusive. From their standard, it's
Yeah,
pretty conclusive. Does it prove with absolute certainty? No, we can't prove anything with certainty. So
yeah.
I grant
I'm not
that.
looking for absolute certainty either.
Right.
Yeah,
So
but
so
I guess to me, a lot of the examples, like the the zapping or the people pressing the button, and like a few milliseconds before they saw that, all that stuff seems to be uh, correlations, not causation. That's what I'm saying.
well, yeah, I grant that as a possibility.
Basically,
So
every experiment I've heard of is, or I've seen, and I haven't seen or heard that many. So, but they're usually just correlations.
well, yeah, all experiments in science are necessarily correlations. We can't ever prove causation. That's one of the postulates of Hume. So it's like we could be in the matrix. Like
Ever
if we
prove causation?
so like if we go outside of the if we like an astronaut, we're sitting on the space station, we see like, oh, the world is clearly round. Well, that doesn't actually prove it's round because we could be in the matrix. You could be in a dream. You could be being deluded by Descartes' demon.
Oh, you mean prove as in like Cartesian certainty, like
Yeah,
100% certain.
that's what it would mean to.
I meant like what you were saying conclusively. If we're using that the same way, uh, like like uh, I can prove not 100%. I can show that the space station was created, or that if I'm sitting on the space station and I'm looking at the Earth, like I'm pretty confident that it's round, right? Or that it was like I don't know, like the space station was caused by people, coming together and making an international space station.
Right. So we'd say that we have really good evidence that the space station was created by humans. It's got all the serial numbers on it. We have the history of it written down. We can go through. We can watch the videos of it being made. Like we can definitely show this was probably very likely to be human. Now it's possible we're just in the Matrix, or that aliens programmed this in a computer or whatever. We can't be certain. But that seems to be like the exact same thing we have for free will. Just like we show that the space station was designed by humans, we can show that choices are made by the mind, because just like the serial numbers in the space station show that here's the history of it being made, we can show the genetic markers and the synapses of what the brain occurs that cause the choices. And we can change the electrical signals in the brain to change the choices, just like we can change the parts on the space station. So it seems like we have equally as reasonable, conclusive evidence that the space station is made by humans as that the brain is determined by physical forces.
So you're saying that it's more like 50-50, because I was getting the impression earlier that it was like
90 something.
That like the majority of scientists agree that we're determined and that the brain
90% something.
Right, 90% they agree. But if you ask them, they'll say, well, it's 50-50. We don't know if it's actually we don't know if we have free will or not.
No, they all say it's determined. Like, it's all determined. No one says the free will thing. Like there's a few interviews of Seth Andrews and a few cognitive scientists. Julian Mussolino is one of them. He says, yeah, like pretty much nobody in the field thinks there's this free will thing. All of the evidence is that the vast majority, like everybody I know in the field, says this is ridiculous. It's all determined. So pretty much everybody in the field says no. It's like if you ask a scientist, is the space station man-made, they're going to be like, yep. And if you ask a neurologist, is the brain determined, they're like, yep. That's essentially the response.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that I don't mind disagreeing with the consensus, because I think that
right. So your argument is that the free will thing doesn't seem to be as or our brain being determined does not seem to be as conclusive as the fact that the space station is designed by humans. Whereas I'm saying, yes, it is. Those seem to be the same. What do you think is the difference?
Yeah, I guess I think that all the experiments, with the synapse and all that stuff, they're correlations. They show correlations with our brain and our mind. I don't think that they show conclusively, or that they give some kind of strong evidence that the brain is the mind and that our will is determined.
But isn't that the same for the space station? Like all of the different parts of the space station are correlations. Like we have a correlation between that serial number and that serial number. We have a correlation between the shape of the docking port and the shape of the space, lander or whatever. All of those are correlations. Like literally everything in science is a correlation. So why are those correlations sufficient and the correlations between the brain and our choices not sufficient? Because they're all correlations.
Right. So I have some arguments that I think for the soul that are pretty good. And I think there's maybe a confusion between those correlations. So like the correlations between serial numbers are not the same thing as a correlation between, let's say, the person inside the space station, right? So like if I'm correlating a person to the space station who put it together versus just some serial numbers, that's not the same correlation, right? Like
I'm not following.
Right, because you were correlating the serial numbers. I'm not correlating a synapse with another synapse, right? Or am I misunderstanding your analogy? Because like to me,
so every single fact in science is a correlation. You can never prove causation. So every single fact about the space station is a correlation. So the shape of the space station, the people in it, the history, the serial numbers, the physical shape, the composing parts, the screws, all of those are correlations. Like if we look at the space station, every single fact we could ever describe about the space station, we are correlating to past data. We're saying, well, all of this stuff and all of this stuff, there seems to be a correlation between these two. Therefore, this is man-made. So all of the past data we look at is a correlation to the observation of everything we see in the space station. So every single fact about the space station is a correlation, which is how we come to the conclusion that it's man-made. And every single fact about the brain and our choices is also a correlation, which is how we come to the conclusion that our choices are determined. So what's the difference? You said there's a difference between the correlations between the serial numbers. I didn't understand your relation to the person inside of it, but how is all of the facts that we look at the space station are correlations? How are all of those facts different from all the facts that we look at in the brain?
Yeah, so let me see if maybe this will clear things up. 1 second, because I have something on the soul. My computer is being really slow.
Give me 1 second. I'll be back in 1 second.
Okay.
Okay.
So like basically, you there?
Yep, I'm here.
So like for example, identity over time. There's like another argument: indivisibility of personhood, consciousness is a unity,
So you're saying
and
that
so like,
these arguments override the correlation. So, like, if we had arguments that the space station was not man-made, that would override the correlation of the serial numbers.
no, I guess I'm having trouble with your analogy because like I'm trying to. Uh, this is the distinction I'm making. So like for example, like whenever we look at the correlations between our will and our consciousness and the brain or whatever correlation, seems like your argument is that it shows that the consciousness and our will is the same thing as the brain, right?
Yep.
Uh, it seems like if I were to use that as an analogy, it's like saying like, well, if I were to compare the bolts and screws and the serial numbers on the International Space Station, I can therefore conclude that the humans inside of it and the bolts and they're the same thing, the bolts and the serial numbers. Like that, it seems like you're kind of making a stretch there, or maybe I'm just not understanding your
What do you mean
analogy.
the humans and the bolts and the serial numbers are the same thing? I'm not following.
Yeah, you said correlations, right? You're correlating it. So to, because you're saying you cannot prove causation,
Right.
right? So like just strictly speaking, sure, like it's really hard to prove a lot of things 100%, right? You know, but in terms of what I mean by like those experiments that we do on the brain, they're they're gosh, like I totally lost the word. They're 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 showing correlations between something. They're never showing causations. And I'm not saying the scientists and the neuroscientists are trying to prove causality. They're saying that, oh look, it's probably caused or whatever.
Right. Right. So how
It's
is,
caused by the brain.
because when I look at the screws and the serial numbers, that doesn't prove that they were caused by humans. Like they could be caused by random fluctuations or bolts from brains, whatever just popped out of randomness. But it's most likely they were caused by humans. So that's a correlation. So we have a correlation between serial numbers and the processing that humans do and this object. So this object seems to be like it's been manufactured by these manufacturing processes because there's a correlation between the physical properties that happen during this manufacturing process and the physical properties of this object.
Right. Mhm.
There's a correlation. It doesn't prove causation. Like we can never prove the causation that this was caused by human manufacturing. It's just highly likely. It's the most likely explanation. So in the
Right.
brain, how
Because
is
bolts and serial numbers can't cause themselves, right? Is that
cause
a
it?
good way to put it?
Uh, Granted, it can't cause itself, but it could be caused by other things other than human machining. So it could be caused by a computer program. It could be caused by a delusion. It could be caused by random fluctuations in the universe, just smashing things together, and it could randomly
Yeah,
pop this piece out. Highly
I don't know
unlikely.
about that, but
Well, it's possible in physics. It's one of the things. It's just extremely unlikely. So very very unlikely, but it
yeah,
is possible. So the point here is that we can never prove causation. We can never prove that man made the space station. It's just highly highly likely. It's the most likely by a significant margin, 99 something percent.
right. And so for you, you wouldn't be able to say um, like uh, a non-physical, immaterial, free soul caused my decisions.
Well, I could do that just like I could say that a random natural process has produced the International Space Station. Like it's possible. Like yeah, I can't say it's logically impossible. Maybe a whole bunch of black holes just came together in the exact right amount to cause all of the screws to be formed and to assemble the space station. Yeah, it's possible,
Yeah,
but that is just not likely. It seems like
yeah,
the correlations between the serial numbers and the building of the space station say yeah, it's man-made. That we can make that based off of the correlations. But it seems like we
right.
can do the same thing for the brain. Like it has the same correlations that our brain causes our choices, just like the serial
Yeah,
numbers are caused by humans. So I'm not. So the correlations are the same. Everything in science is a correlation. So just calling it a correlation doesn't say it's not sufficient evidence to come to be conclusive evidence. So why do you think the correlations of the brain and our choices are different than the correlations between the space station and the human-made thing? And what's the difference between saying the space station came about by random black holes forming? How is that not the same as saying that we have free will? Because it seems like those are equally as strange based off of the correlations. Because it doesn't seem to like there's no correlation between the space station and black holes forming it, and there doesn't seem to be any correlation between our brains and free will. But there's lots of correlations between the space station and serial numbers, and there's lots of correlations between the brain and determined forces. Why would we not come to those as the reasonable conclusions equally? It seems like those are the same thing.
yeah. So I, I have like those three arguments for like the soul that I mentioned earlier. I think that they're um, make it more reasonable to believe that there is something non-physical that's not just the brain, because there's a lot of other problems with just concluding it's the brain as well. A lot of times your parodies and your analogies are usually like pretty ad hoc and way more complicated. And so like I, I it's
Well, I mean, I think that's a separate topic. I mean, I'd say it can't be more ad hoc and complicated than an all-knowing, all-powerful, all-living being, but that's a different topic.
they are, but yeah,
Different topic. So, but your argument is that the reason the correlation between the space station and humans is more reasonable is because or the reason that the correlation between the brain and choices is less reasonable is because there are arguments, and so these arguments, if there were arguments that that the space station was not man-made, that would then make it reasonable to reject the correlations between the serial numbers and human designing.
yeah. This is so. This is like we're getting into things that I have not touched up on or read
All
in a
right, and just to be
long
polite, you
time.
did say you only had an hour, and we're reaching that mark, so I want to be.
Yeah, yeah. We're like got a couple minutes. Gosh, that went by really fast, man. Um, yeah, I guess if I could summarize real quick, um, uh, we're trying to get to an undetermined mind that has free will, that's free, right? And it's not bound by time, and it caused the universe. So to me, I think that something that isn't determined um, must be free, and something just randomly happening. I think a better option than a random entity or thing is something like that could create the universe. I think the better option would be something that isn't just random, but it's also, well, yeah, basically what I said earlier. It's free. So to me, it seems like you have a lot less problems if it's something that's free, that's undetermined, because it makes more sense. It can determine, decide. It can create the universe. Um, and so, in terms of in terms of the free will, I think that um, I think that I have other arguments that I can kind of point to the soul, and then we can go later on that. But there's other arguments that show there's problems with just simply assuming that the brain is just physical stuff, and that's what the consciousness is.
Yeah, and so
And oh, oh, go ahead.
just to summarize, my point is so that I understand your argument, and my questions would be, you would need to explain why we think this free will thing exists, which I haven't shown
Mhm.
any reason to show that it's, because it seems like all the correlations between the brain being determined seem just like the correlations between the space station being humans. But I don't think that arguments that the brain is free would cause me to believe in free will any more than arguments that the space station could be made by aliens would cause me to believe it's made by aliens. But I don't think the arguments are justifiable. But I don't think it's reasonable to think there is free will just because you feel it, or just because of
So
the arguments. And I think that in addition to that, you would also need to then also show why, even if we granted that this free will thing existed, why that would be preferable to the random stuff. Because it seems like it would still, the random stuff and determinism would still be preferable. And so those would be the two sticking points where I think we would go next if you have time.
yeah, we don't have time, but I was gonna say like if you just grant for the sake of argument or whatever, if you could show that uh, that the brain isn't the mind, and we there is this immaterial entity or thing that does have free will, then that would be in favor of an all-powerful unembodied mind or entity, right?
Well, sure. So if we had evidence of non-physical minds, then that would be
Uh-huh.
in the direction of that there could be a bigger non-physical mind. Sure.
Hmm. Yeah. Okay. A non-contingent creator.
Well, those would be extra things, but yeah. So if you showed we
Mhm.
had one example of a non-physical mind, then it would be more
Okay.
reasonable to posit that there were other ones, including the beginning of the universe. Just like if we show there are physical things, then it's reasonable to posit the beginning of the universe was a physical thing. If we have evidence of something in its induction, we can say we can use that same thing to explain other things for sure.
Okay. Uh, okay. Well, yeah. Obviously, we haven't. We still need a lot more time to go into that. But oh man, I did not expect it to get into the whole free will and mind thing. Um, yeah. I guess that's it.
Cool. Thanks for coming on. Really appreciate it. It was a great conversation, and be happy to talk with you again sometime.
Yeah, just let me know, man. Hopefully, I'll be more read up on this, and unless we go into another direction of something I'm not touched up on, or yeah, I really appreciate it, Tom. Thank you. It's an honor to be on your YouTube channel. I'm just some guy. We just met for the first time like an hour ago. I appreciate you inviting me, and I'm looking forward to having another conversation with you if you do want to have me on. And
Absolutely.
yeah, yeah, I hope this doesn't bother you, but I'm praying for you, and I appreciate I appreciate what you do, and yeah, thank you.
Yep. Thanks. Thanks again. Really enjoyed the conversation, and I'll let you go. Talk to you later.